Good afternoon, Joe.
Hello, thank you for having me. This is going to be a lot
No,
of
you're
fun.
welcome. So, this afternoon, I'm recording this episode of the podcast with my own coach, Joseph Pack. Welcome, Joe. So, I missed out the word ADHD when I said coach. So, Joe is my ADHD coach, but I deliberately omitted the word ADHD, even though it's not a word, because the focus of this episode is about leaving the ADHD label behind, potentially. We're not dismissing ADHD. Joe and I both have it. We're both ADHD coaches. But we're questioning how tightly we need to hang on to those letters, not a word, ADHD. Now, before we unpack this a little bit further, and there's no pun intended on your surname there, Joe, um, as this is something for the Busy Brain podcast, what does having a busy brain mean to you?
Well, that is good, and I'd not even thought about answering that. So, yeah, what
Well,
having
so
a bit?
what you're saying,
Yeah.
Joe, is you're challenging me in no, I'm challenging you in the way that you challenge me then.
mm. I would say having a busy brain. What does it mean to me? I would say it's extremely bloody annoying, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, and again, I think that question is really relevant to why we're doing this episode and the conversation you and I had a week ago that people weren't
Yeah.
privy to, but might hear a lot of that in a minute.
Mm.
Is that I actually think that the diagnosis of ADHD, which was 10 years ago for me now, almost justified and normalized the busyness of my brain so
Okay.
that
Yep.
it became not only an identification, and people do not like the word I'm about to use now, but it is, for me, I don't really mind what other people say about themselves, but an excuse to not work on the things that are typically challenges for people who are diagnosed with this thing called ADHD. That's
Mm.
it, I think. So I don't think that the busy brain is necessarily a problem to be
No.
diagnosed. And if we're diagnosed with something like a disorder, it's so easy. I'm quite a strong-minded person. I mean, you can see that
Mm.
from my content and over the years and the things I've done in my career and whatever. But even I was just totally wrapped up in the diagnostic explanation of ADHD to the point where I actually think that the diagnostic explanation of ADHD governed my behavior and actions and certainly limited me.
Mm.
I
You-
don't think it explained me. I think it actually was almost subconsciously manipulating me to be a certain way.
it's interesting that you say limits you because I think your experience is probably not dissimilar to my own when you're working with clients. Um, from my perspective, a client will invariably come to me fresh off the back of a relatively recent diagnosis. They're having a mini identity crisis and they're consumed by those four letters ADHD. And and they want to know what it means and make sense of things. And if you take the, you know, if you take the ADHD away from someone, what are you left with? Exactly the same thing, exactly the same person. You're left with an individual. Um, and I've had that own experience through my clients. I've had that own experience myself. You try and explore what ADHD means to you rather than actually understanding yourself. I know from my diagnosis about 12 years back, I told everyone I'd got ADHD for about 2 years. That's all I talked about. I didn't even know what it meant to me.
Me too. That's
Mm.
exactly what I did. And when I got diagnosed with ADHD, I was struggling the most that I had ever struggled in my life. I was 26. I had not long come out of hospital after having the seizures that,
Mm.
anyone that knows me knows about. and I was desperately seeking something stable to hold on to, and I couldn't
Yeah.
find
Okay.
anything. I really was very, very lonely at the time, and I was seeking success at any cost,
Mm.
and it wasn't coming. Even though that is completely and utterly subjective, what does that even mean?
What was behind that then?
I don't know. I really don't, and I don't think it even.
Sorry.
And I don't. No, I don't. And I don't think it even matters. Like it was
Mm.
obviously, it was probably mimetic desire. I think, and I think that if you don't know what mimetic desire means, it was coined by René Girard, the philosopher, and it's basically where I think it explains human behavior to a T, which is that we will often take on the characteristics of those around us completely subconsciously. We've
Mm.
no control over it. We often want what the others in the community want, right down to the very specific color of something. We can often fall into it. And you think, why do people with ADHD all seem to be similar to each other when you get them in a room? It's not because of some diagnosis, it's because of mimetic desire. And I think that that's exactly the same thing that happened to me in my mid-20s. It was around about the time that, things like Instagram and YouTube and stuff were really flying. And I worked in the marketing world and marketing
Yep.
agency. That's what I owned. And it was all about success and growth and ego and one-upmanship and all this kind of thing. And you just fall into it. And no matter how well you are doing objectively, you don't feel that you're doing well. And actually, when I look back to say that I was 22 or 21 when I started that business, to think about how well we were doing, not just financially, which was great, but in terms of like the clients we worked with and opportunities we had at 23 was just bloody ridiculous. But I didn't feel it.
Mm.
Didn't feel it at all. Felt like it just wasn't working, but it really was. And then 3 years later, I obviously get this diagnosis of ADHD, and finally something to hold on to, something to tell everybody. You know that how I'm not very good at that thing. It's because of this ADHD. You know how I was late then? That's because of ADHD. Do you know?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, there's like a relaxation. A lot of people that get diagnosed with ADHD, because I've spoken to so many people that have been diagnosed with ADHD over the past several years. There's either a kind of like a feeling of what do you call it? Grieving. That's it.
Mm.
I couldn't think
Yep.
of the word. There's a grieving,
Yep.
or there's a great weight lifted. Well, that was for me, it was a great weight lifted. Why? Because all of a sudden I didn't have to try harder to be on time for X. I just said, I've got ADHD.
ADHD.
And some people I've worked with take that to the absolute extreme, and it doesn't improve. It makes their life significantly worse. And there is absolutely no reason whatsoever that they could. There's nothing stopping them from learning how to be on time. But the diagnosis of ADHD, listen, I'm being very careful with the wording. I'm not saying ADHD. I'm saying the diagnosis of ADHD is actually making it easier for them to not try to be on time. I'm not saying that it's easy for us to be on time. I'm not saying that people with busy brains, I much prefer that. I much prefer the idea that we have busy brains. There's some people with busy brains and some people that don't have busy brains. It doesn't have to be a disorder. I'm not saying that it's not difficult for us to be on time. I know it is, so I'm not denying that. But it doesn't mean that we cannot learn to be on time. We can. The diagnosis of ADHD, for some people, for a lot of people, can make it much more difficult for them to be on time.
That's the
It's
interesting.
totally counterintuitive. And
That's the interesting thing you said there.
Go on, go for it.
You've said about the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And you said specifically about the diagnosis. So what is it about a formal diagnosis that does make a difference?
I guess there's multiple different lenses to look at that through. I suppose at the time, at 26 years old, all I could find were positives. But with the benefit of hindsight, 10 years later, I don't think that they were positives at all. And I think that I think over the last 10 years, I have significantly limited myself in my attempt and effort to get better at the things that I believed I could never get good at because I have this disorder.
Mm.
And Dr. Sami Tamimi, who I think is one of the wisest people on the subject of ADHD and autism, in his book Searching for Normal, he actually says in there that everyone in the sort of ADHD influencer space, and I've been guilty of this as well, so I'll hold my hands up, has said, people with ADHD are more likely to commit suicide. People with ADHD are more likely to do X, Y, and Z, very, very negative things. He says if you really closely look at the data, it's actually nothing to do with ADHD. It's to do with the diagnosis. So people diagnosed with ADHD are much more likely to commit suicide. That's true. But it's got nothing to do with ADHD. It's to do with the diagnosis.
But that's the separation.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. So once you, and this is really prevalent with autism, where, children that have been diagnosed with autism are then, particularly boys, then just feel completely limited in their like, well, what's the point? And he has told me, and I think he wrote about this in the book in Searching for Normal. He by the way, he was a consultant psychiatrist in the NHS for like 40 years, so he's seen all of these cases time and time again. Young boys trying to kill themselves basically at like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old because they believe that this diagnosis of autism means that their life will be crap. Like they'll never achieve anything whatsoever. And when he's basically lifted the shackles of that diagnosis from them and said, you don't have autism, and it then works with the person, doesn't mean it doesn't have struggles. This boy has struggles. The boys have struggles. But once that's lifted, then he can help them see positive future, and they change completely. And that is why I have dropped my ADHD diagnosis, because I'm saying 2026 is the year of shattering my limiting beliefs. I have spent the last decade swimming in limiting beliefs.
Go on, give me some examples.
Okay. So, for example, not consistently exercising, right? Intermittent. So, for example, not having a habit dashboard, like habit tracker on the wall in my office, right? Because I think, well, what's the point? I've got ADHD. I'll never put all the crosses in, each day. Or like learning a language. So actually, I have been wanting to learn a language for so long, but I just believed how it's such a difficult thing to do, and someone with ADHD, that's going to be so much more difficult.
How can I stick with it? Yeah,
exactly. I've lifted that from me. I've been learning Italian, and I'm sticking to it every single day. Right?
What's been the difference there?
I believe now. I believe I can do it now. There's no excuse now. Like, so for example, I've missed a day from a habit. ADHD. I'll never get back on it again. Now it's like, I've missed a day. I'll just do it tomorrow. It was just a switch. There were several things that happened last year that have led up to this. There were things like people in the ADHD, I felt that the conversation of ADHD and autism, I'm using autism because my son is very severely autistic, so I'm very much in that world. So the conversation is just being dominated by celebrities who just talk out their arse all the time. They have no idea what they're talking about, which is why if you go and pay close attention to, say, Dr. Sami Tamimi, Dr. Asad Rafi, right, people who are very trustworthy, they will tell you something completely different to what these celebrities are spouting. And but because of the nature of the world that we live in, obviously the doctors aren't the ones that people are listening to. They're just listening to the celebrities, and the celebrities are wrong. So, that, and so there was that, and then I've started to sort of pull away from that kind of ADHD world a little bit. I'm still coaching clients, and I really do enjoy that.
Same, yeah.
But it's and then I just made the decision to drop the diagnosis to see what would happen. If it's just for 1 year of my life, and I was to go back to it in 2027, so be it. But there's no way that's going to happen now. And it was now that I can see that it's like the most important thing really is, if I don't stick to the habit, then it's okay. I'll get back on the horse tomorrow. And that wasn't the case for 10 years. There was always that, ADHD makes that way more difficult. ADHD, and it's just an excuse.
And
What do
I
you,
think,
obviously you've been diagnosed with ADHD, and there are going to be some people listening to this that are going to be so unbelievably offended, and and that gets me onto another point that we can come to later, which is that ADHD is not the most prevalent part of the ADHD is not the diagnosis, is it? It's the identity.
yeah, oh,
So if you go, if
100%.
you were talking, we were talking about diabetes,
Mm,
say type 1 diabetes, that most
yep.
people, that's genetic. No one's going to get offended
No.
if we talk about it, say, oh, maybe the doctors have got it all wrong. Like, look at all this data, blah 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 blah. No one's going to get offended. But as soon as you start talking about ADHD, it's not. We're not. It's almost. We're not talking about a diagnosis anymore, a medical thing. We're just talking about an identification. And actually, you can go to a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu and debate them all day about their religion. But you try and do that to someone who is diagnosed with ADHD and wedded to the neurodiversity movement, you will not
Mm,
be able to debate them. They will shut you down immediately. So what's that? That's like, okay, if we do look at that through a religious lens, what are we doing? Or is it like arguing with a fundamentalist Christian or something? Or there are obviously religious people out there that will not debate you, but they tend to be the most hardcore extreme fundamentalists. Try debating with a neurodiversity person who believes in neurodiversity, you will get the exact same response. They just
I
won't
think
have the
there's
conversation.
I think there's something here around. I think so many people will have had that formal diagnosis, will have tried to figure out what that means to them. They'll have disappeared down a rabbit hole, Googling things and reading every textbook under the planet and going, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. Um, I found through coaching, one of the best ways to sort of understand yourself and understand ADHD is talking to people with that life experience, particularly those who might be further on further on down the road. Um, but then I think there's a challenge sometimes and I'm guilty of it, when you find your tribe, you want to find other neurodivergents,
Yeah.
you mix with other people, and it's great because you can still have that narrative of, oh, that's just ADHD, but then you laugh about it collectively, and I think that becomes the norm. And I've noticed it with me that I laugh about those things, and that takes away from how utterly debilitating it can be. Now, I think there are clearly better ways of exploring ourselves, of unearthing our potential. Um, this brings me into coaching with you. Now, um, you and I first had a conversation, I think about 3 years ago, and I think I said to you back then, I can see myself working with you at some point, but I don't think that point is me right now, and that's cool because you're probably the fifth, maybe sixth coach I've had. Um, and you work with different coaches at different points in terms of where you are at and the coach that meets your needs for where you are at. Um, but what I particularly like about working with you, Joe, and this sort of extends to anyone listening, is you challenge the good in me. You challenge me when I put those limitations on myself. So I think having those people around you that can support you, that can champion you, enable you to lean into the best of yourself and explore that. And you do bloody challenge me. You really do. But I like that. I like the fact that often it's deeply uncomfortable and I sit there because I know I'm also in that safe space that you provide to explore what could be if I looked at things differently. And I think the benefit, not a coaching plug, but the benefit of seeing things through a coaching lens is you're looking at how you move forwards. And I think you and I have both got to a point very much aligned with each other, working together. We've had those conversations where we are both realizing the things that have been holding us back, but we also know what we are capable of. And I think that limitation that people can impose on themselves through ADHD as a label can be incredibly frustrating as a coach when you see so much potential. So, um, I think we need to look at how we better ourselves, how we better explore ourselves. And sometimes that is a case of asking ourselves uncomfortable questions around, are the people who are my tribe, are the people I'm around holding me back?
Yeah.
Or do I just need some more people in my life who see the way I see things, see the potential, see the, the world changing innovations that you've got, and allow you to get there?
And I genuinely believe that the removal of an ADHD diagnosis, that has to be a completely and utterly personal decision, of course,
Mm,
is the gateway to being able to do that. And I think that the ADHD diagnosis will always be a weight around the neck of a person who even has the intention to do those things, like me. You
mm,
know, the other thing is that, if anyone, and a lot of people are going to be disagreeing with this, and that's fine.
and that's
And
fine.
again,
Yeah.
it's good actually, and that we shouldn't, the people in the neurodiversity space I was talking about 5 minutes ago that won't have anyone disagree with them, they need to just shut up for a bit, because there is an opportunity to have a conversation between two people that completely disagree with each other and see where we can get to. And it doesn't, even if you get to the end of that conversation and you haven't changed your mind, so what? There may have been one little thing that maybe helps you see something slightly differently, so long as we can be open. But I will say this, and this is going to probably upset people. An ADHD diagnosis is actually extremely easy to get. And
Yeah.
I feel quite confident that I would be able to pick anyone off the street and within 30 minutes train them to get one.
Mm,
Now, of course, forgetting the fact that if an ADHD diagnosis is done properly, family members and stuff need to have written basically a report about you, or answered some questions at least, but not all ADHD diagnoses are done that way. But, if you look at the diagnostic criteria, it says things like excessive fidgeting, excessive distractibility, excessive blah, blah, blah. Well, what the hell does excessive mean?
yeah.
So there are two ways of looking at this. One is you and I might have totally different views of what excessive means.
Mm,
Two psychiatrists might have two different views of what excessive means. That's just in this country. Now imagine that in Japan, for example, excessive is very different to in Indonesia. So
mm,
how the hell can you know with absolute certainty that the thing that you are being diagnosed with is correct? Especially when, if scientists are being completely honest about this, that there is no DNA link with ADHD. There's no gene
mm,
found that's ADHD at all. So, and there's certainly nothing in brain scans, at least brain scans that are non-fraudulent. So it's a subjective thing. So that, again, does not mean that people who have been diagnosed with ADHD are not distractible and late and fidgety. But also, you might have been diagnosed with ADHD at, say, 11 and be very fidgety and blah, blah, blah. But now you're 30 and you're not anymore.
mm.
And all these people in the neurodiversity world on LinkedIn and Instagram will tell you that it's for life. It's not for life, because it's just a word. It's not even a word. Like you said, it's just a collection of letters pointing to a description of something. It's
Mm.
not diabetes. It's not cancer. It's not a heart attack. It's not those things.
And I
It's just
think
a
if you
description. It's just a description. That's it.
and I think
That is it.
that's it. Um,
Well, on that DNA thing, I don't think people realize there have actually been tens of thousands of people who have been analyzed in genetic heritability studies, who have been diagnosed with ADHD, and they found nothing.
mm,
And so it's so much so they found so little that now occasionally, if you're on the internet, you'll find that people talk about this thing called the missing heritability link. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
no, I
You'll
haven't.
hear
No.
neurodiversity people talking about the missing heritability link. And what they're basically saying is, we couldn't find anything in the tens of thousands of people that we've tested over all these studies. So there must be something, though. I mean, look at us all. We're all the same, aren't we? We're different to those people over there. So there must be something. So that's the missing thing. We're just still looking for it. That's not how science works. That's basically coming at it from the assumption that something exists. Science doesn't work like that. I'm no scientist, but the very basic foundation of science is that you start from something called a null hypothesis, which basically means you start under the assumption that there's nothing there. So basically, so let's use ADHD medication as an example, which is a controversial subject. ADHD medication,
one that you enjoy talking about.
One that I enjoy talking about, yeah. So ADHD medication of Big Pharma should do all of their research based on the assumption that it does not work and that it's dangerous. And they have to prove that that's wrong. So it's the opposite. They have to prove that it doesn't work and that it's dangerous is wrong. I'm being really careful with my words there. They're not starting off with the assumption that it's wrong and proving that it works. They're proving that the assumption that it's dangerous is wrong. That's actually different to proving that it's not dangerous.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
That's how but they don't do it that way. Which is why you get, I was literally just talking to someone the other day, and I'm not going to disclose their name at all, but he's someone who is in his late 40s, I believe, been diagnosed with ADHD recently. And he was in a relationship with someone who had 2 children, 2 boys, teenagers, and their father died when they were 8 and 10. And the younger one, who is now in his maybe, 13 or something, he has been diagnosed with ADHD and has been put on ADHD medication. Okay. If you believe a lot, again, another controversial figure in the ADHD world, Gabor Mate. Gabor Mate says that ADHD is really Gabor Mate says ADHD is not a lifelong condition, right? He says that again and again and again. And he says it's the result of trauma, of various types of trauma. Well, obviously, this boy who has father died at 8 has experienced extreme trauma, and it's manifesting as what looks like this thing called ADHD. So basically, they put him on these stimulants. But now these stimulants are an inflammatory, so they inflame the entire body, basically, and then they are a hunger suppressant as well. So he's basically taking the medication all day and then coming home and then binge eating junk food, which is then inflaming the body even more. Well, that just makes him need more medication the next day, because if his body's inflamed, then these so-called ADHD symptoms will be significantly more severe the next day.
Yeah.
Or let's use what we said, the busy brain will be so busy. Then the ADHD medication, it looks like it works. It seems to make him focus. Well, it will do. It's a stimulant. But then there's more inflammation, and it's a cycle, and it adds and adds and adds and adds and adds and adds. And then after 3 to 5 years, that's when people generally come to me, or have done the past few years, because they did once believe that this ADHD medication was some sort of like magic miracle thing that was going to make them feel better, which it does feel like that for 18 months, but then it doesn't.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult subject, because I just really, I hope that people do understand that I'm not trying to take anything away from the individual struggles of anyone. I'm not saying you're not distracted and fidgety and late and whatever else apparently makes you have ADHD. I'm just saying I don't think the ADHD diagnosis itself and what that leads to, which is limiting beliefs, potential medication, and everything, all the bad stuff that comes with that, I don't think it's very good for us.
Yeah. I think I was frantically scribbling away so that I didn't have that wayward train moment like I did about 5 minutes ago. And I think what's interesting here, Joe, is you and I, for very different reasons, have had a reason to explore what can support ADHD. So we've opened the door to exploring things beyond medication. Um, so for me, when I was diagnosed, I didn't know what I wanted to achieve from the diagnosis. I just wanted to make sense of things. I was working in I'd previously worked in sales and marketing, and there was order, systems, process, protocol. Um, so I knew what I was working with, and if information came in, I knew where to store it. And then I went and worked in the charity sector, and it was the most multifaceted job role I'd ever had. And data storage was what? I've got a Word doc or a scrumpled up piece of paper over there with some notes on, and I couldn't make sense of things. So I couldn't make sense of my brain. And because I was struggling, and I know why I was struggling looking back on it, hindsight and the experience and knowledge I've acquired since, but I was looking for answers. And I thought one of those answers was was exploring the ADHD diagnosis. And then I still spent 2 years trying to explore how that was the answer. And I tried tried different medications. I tried stimulants. I tried non-stimulants. The side effects were horrific. I won't go into them because some of them were deeply personal. But it they were horrific. So I had to go, okay, what needs to change here? Now, I was working in the charity sector, so I could put my heart and my energy into things. I remember asking the head of Wales programs at a Christmas party after a few beers why I was chosen for the role. And he said, "You beat 68 other applicants." And I would say, and I said, "What was it about me?" And he said, "You're a rough diamond. There was that energy. There was something about you." And I'd say that was because of your ADHD. So I got in there because of me before I knew I had ADHD. I got in there
Mm.
because of me. That was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
The slowest I moving forwards was those 2 years when I got the ADHD diagnosis and I tried to figure out what the fuck it actually meant to me.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I know that nothing was, that the medication wasn't helping. When I found medication that calmed my brain, it didn't turn me into that guy who could just go out there and sign up people left, right, and center. People would say, "How do you do that?" I don't know. It's just something that I do.
Exactly.
Um, and I think, I would like you to give your account of why you had to explore alternatives. Um, and I know you're a deep, long, avid learner. You have this thirst for knowledge. Um, you've quoted people and books and speakers like no one I've ever heard before. And that was actually how I was going to introduce you, but I thought, no, I'll see if he drops a few in, and you haven't let me down.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think it would be really beneficial for people to hear that you had to explore alternatives to medication because it wasn't, the magic pill. So, please, give a little bit of a backstory, Joe.
Yeah. I mean, so, I did try the medication for a couple of weeks, but and I shouldn't have done. I wasn't supposed to because I'd had these seizures in 2016 and they were caused by exhaustion and caffeine, basically huge amounts of caffeine that I was taking every single day, um, in the form of coffee.
Yeah.
And so I had no choice, basically, but to explore other methods. And I found that, meditation, breathing techniques, cold exposure were very, very beneficial. And then actually in the last 2 years or so, I've found particularly diet and exercise have been extremely important. You know, oh God, you could get so nerdy about this, but
Go
it's
on,
you
go
go
on.
in
You
such a
won't
rabbit
surprise
hole.
me, Joe.
You know, like it's mad how. Okay, so if you go into a supermarket and look at the ingredients on everything that you buy in your shopping trolley, if you don't recognize one of the, say, several ingredients in it, put it back on the shelf immediately. And if you do that, that's a really quick sort of shortcut. You'll feel better very quickly
Go on, explain
without
that.
going into a huge amount. So it'll be, if you don't if you don't have never heard of that ingredient or can't go
Mhm.
and find it in a field somewhere,
Yep.
then it will be made in a factory, and therefore it'll be ultra processed. And
So
if it's ultra
what
processed,
you're
it will
doing there is
not.
making a conscious decision.
Yeah, your body will not be able to process it properly. And as there's so much evidence on this, it's been led by what's it called again? Well, there's Dr. Tim Spector, who has got a TV show on Channel 4 at the moment. And he's part of what company is he part of now? Bloody hell, forgotten. You'll go and Google Dr. Tim Spector and you'll find there's like a company that he's like the chief science officer for, or chief medical officer for. And basically,
We can
the
put it in the
research
links
has shown,
afterwards.
yeah, the research has shown that um, ultra processed foods effectively kills your microbiome, it's called. And the microbiome is like trillions of little cells that live inside your stomach. And when you eat, they basically eat the food you've eaten. Certain foods help the microbiome flourish, even grow in number. So things like fermented foods, like kimchi, kombucha, tempeh, tofu, that kind of thing, that
Mm.
helps to grow the microbiome, that actually increases the numbers. Foods that are ultra processed, so like for example, most of the things in the freezer aisle in the supermarket, most of the things on the crisps and the chocolate aisle, most of the things in the supermarket, unfortunately, have one or more ultra processed additive in that serves really either one of two purposes: to keep it on the shelf longer or to make it uniform. So I don't know why this comes to mind, but if you look at, for example, a Cadbury's finger, right?
Mhm.
You line up every single Cadbury's finger that's ever been made in history, billions and billions of them, every single one will look exactly the same.
Mhm.
That is ultra processed. So there are different categories of food. There is natural food, which is milk, for example, and then there's processed food, which is cheese. So it's taking milk and processing it into cheese. Now, you can make an ultra processed cheese, like, for example, a cheese string.
Mm.
You're not going to be able to make a cheese string outside of a lab. It'd have to be in a
No,
lab or a
no.
factory, right? Once you cut all of those things out of your diet, and I've just given you the easiest shortcut in the world, which is to look on the back of the packet, and if it's
Yep.
got an ingredient on you don't understand, put it back. That will make an enormous difference to you. One of the main reasons for that is because it will help you sleep better. So even if you're getting, say, 8 hours of sleep a night, lucky you, I don't even get that. That's the joy of having little children. But if you do, it's likely that if you're eating ultra processed foods and all other habits that may not be very good for the body, sleep will be poor. And poor sleep also leads to inflammation. And then inflammation makes things like fidgeting, distractibility,
Yep.
lateness, blah, 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 more difficult to deal with. And there's no wonder that you're struggling. And by the way, Dr. Chris Van Tulliken, again, another wonderful doctor, said, it's not your fault. I totally agree with him. Of course it's not your fault. The supermarket is stacked full of foods that's toxic.
Mm.
We don't know. We don't know. They're also so addictive. It's really difficult not to
Yep.
eat those foods. I'm not perfect, by the way.
Oh,
Right? I'm not
and I'm
pretending to
massively
be perfect.
struggling with
Yeah.
sugar cravings at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
You
yeah.
know, again, it's a vicious cycle. And
Mm.
eating these ultra processed foods makes it more difficult to have the motivation or to exercise. But then on the flip side, exercising can make it easier to eat better foods.
Yeah.
So it's all, if we went back 100 years, not only would there not have been ADHD around, there wouldn't have been, because there wouldn't have been an environment for it to flourish, because the people
That's the thing.
worked with their bodies physically.
Mm,
There was no such thing as ultra processed food at all, and there were no screens. Apart from 1926, there would have been a black and white TV with 2 channels
yeah.
or 1. People read books. There's this fascinating book that was about working class people in the north of England who were basically working in a mine all day or a factory, and then going home and reading these extremely intellectual books and having book
Uh,
group meetings about it.
I
It
think,
was a completely different time. And now, as one scientist said, I forget his name, that our brains have not developed to take in the amount of information that we have today.
mm.
So we're fucked, really.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but we can undo it. And I genuinely believe that the first step is questioning this diagnosis, but
yeah, and
without but still respecting the fact that you are distracted and fidgeting and blah blah blah.
absolutely.
Still respecting all those things and going, right, okay, one by one I can work on these things. And this ADHD thing is not for life. This is an environment. It's totally environment. And in fact, it could be. It's not just environmental. It's cultural as well. I think
Yeah,
it's a cultural construct.
and I
Really.
think there were things that you said there, and again, I was frantically scribbling things down because I think it's important for us to sort of make some of the connections, connect some of those dots for people listening. I think, and I'm going to be processing this out loud, there's a lot of common sense that we all know there are things that we should do that make us function better. You hit on sleep as the water, less caffeine, less alcohol. There are things that we know, but we just go, yeah, but I don't want to give that up. And that's fine. But these are things that we know. The food that we put in, you can be a result of the food that you put in. I know, um, I'm struggling with energy crashes at the moment, but I also know I'm eating vast amounts of sugar, and I know that crash is my brain shutting down after I've just fed it with a load of
Yeah.
crap.
Well, look at what we did.
So,
What I was doing at 26 before I had the seizures and got diagnosed with ADHD. Oh, I'm really tired. I need a coffee.
yeah,
Oh, I
mm,
know. I'm tired. So this coffee. That is so normalized in society. Tired.
I've had a tough
Coffee will
day.
fix it.
I'll have a
Wait, whoa,
glass
whoa,
of
whoa,
wine
whoa.
to wind down.
Yeah. Tired. Sleep. Not
Yeah.
tired. Coffee. And
So I think
I just got it completely wrong. And I'm glad that happened because it woke me up, basically.
there's something here about actually stopping, not pausing, actually stopping to think for ourselves, because everything is available like that on screens, tech, AI, so there's no patience. So I think we've lost a degree of exploration, and trying to understand things, um, and actually, like you said, listening to the body. If someone said to you, if you said, "Oh, I'm permanently exhausted," um, and I get to this point and I keep nodding off. So what do you do? Oh, well, I force myself to carry on watching the thing on the TV, or I make myself a coffee. So we know there is so many things that are obvious in front of us, and we know why that's happening. And I think it's very easy, and I'm trying to bring this back to the ADHD label thing, because I know that when certain things are missing in my life, my symptoms are significantly worse.
Mm-hmm.
Significantly worse. And we can either, and this is the bit that I'm sort of thinking through out loud. You can either try and explore ADHD, explore the medication and find the things that can be the sticky plaster for what's currently broken. Or you can say, actually, there are more healthier things to explore here. You mentioned the environment critical. Earlier on, I mentioned the people that you're with, the foods that you consume. I think let's look at, and it's very much through a coaching lens, but it's obvious. Let's look at who we are when we are our best, when we're at our best. If you look at the times when you worked incredibly well, and I look at certain points in my life where I look back and just go, holy shit, how did I achieve that? And when I take that apart and understand why I achieved that, my environment was different. The people around me were different. I was going to the gym all the time. I was investing in me, and you and I are coaches. And I think the key thing here is listen to yourself, invest in yourself, invest in what you need as a human. You are an individual. So explore what makes you individual, not what makes you the same as that other person over there with ADHD. So
Yeah.
that's the sort of,
Well,
you can,
I think if you
yeah.
can do, I mean, I've been fortunate that I've been able to build a business, ADHD coaching business basically based on posting things on the internet and getting
Mm.
people to pay attention to me and blah, blah, blah. My best advice for anyone who really is likes what we're saying is to just close all of that off completely.
How do
Because,
you do that?
well, shut it down straight away. So there's, for example, practical steps. There is an app called Opal that you could just download that will block all your social media apps. And I would even get to the point where maybe you just delete those apps from your phone if you're really serious about it. Also, turn your phone to grayscale mode so it takes all the color out of it, so it makes the phone look boring. And then just slowly get back to the point of being a human rather than just being a consuming organism, which is
There
basically
is
what we've become.
I think there is a link though. There's a missing bridge between knowing that you want to find the answers, knowing that you want to improve, and actually making that first step. And I'm going to ask you openly now. We talked previously about recording a different podcast episode around resets. And I think sometimes when you are feeling lost, you can't find the answers. So you go, you can't find them in yourself because your brain is blown. So you go asking people, you go reading books, you disappear down rabbit holes on the internet. So, my God, where's that gone? Help me, Joe. Where was I going? Where was I
Well,
going?
you're going to have to what I mean, I don't know exactly what you're going to ask, but what came to mind straight away was, would you recommend, I don't know if this is kind of linked to what you're asking, is I would actually
We'll
recommend
see.
people do a really extreme reset. I don't think it should be done
Resets.
in
That was it. That was it.
I think
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, like full blast. Like
Yeah.
it's got to be an extreme. It has to be the exact opposite to what you're doing.
And I think rather than us opening that dialogue now, thank you so much for bringing me back to the resets, because I think where we want to get to, if we're going to leave things behind, if we are potentially going to, acknowledge the label, but take more control over where, or if we want ADHD to form a key role in us navigating our way forwards, I think you need to be able to stop, take stock of where you're at, and see things from a different perspective. And you're not going to be able to do that if you're wired but tired and you're struggling with burnout. So I think there is a place for resets and to work through those resets, because
Absolutely.
I think when you're left to your own devices, it can feel really difficult to take that first step. when someone is there to support you, or something or someone guides you through it,
Yep.
I think it would be great to have an episode where we work we work through those things. We work through the breath work. We do it in a way that people can pick up. We do it in a very practical way.
Yep.
Not suggesting you and I have an ice bath on on video. No one needs to see that, and I'm just talking from my own perspective. But I think practically, actually supporting someone through that to go, yes, you can say, I've tried breath work, didn't work for me. Don't close the door.
Yep.
It's about doing it properly.
Absolutely. And
So I think a
I
separate
would
session on
100%
resets.
will do that.
Yeah.
It's interesting, just before we finish now,
Mm.
there's one last thing I think. It's that earlier on I said ADHD, or the ADHD diagnosis, is environmental. I think it's also cultural, in
Yep.
that, so people will say, oh, but there's, ADHD diagnoses are skyrocketing today. And they'll say, why? And then there'll be one argument, oh, people have been underdiagnosed for ages, it's just catching up. No, that's not true. It's just a cultural shift. So all those things, fidgeting, distractibility, blah, 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 that are being created by the environment we live in, are considered bad.
Mm.
So then, but why? What if they're not? What about if we remove all those distractions, those things that are causing that? Then that whatever's left is whatever's left. Maybe 50, 60, 70, 80% of the people no longer have excessive anything. And the ones that do are just people with excessive that.
Mm.
And excessive fidgeting based on a UK standard of fidgeting, which is
Yep.
not the same in Japan.
Mm. I
So,
think that's the perfect place to
yeah,
leave that, Joe.
exactly.
That's some great food for thought.
Amazing. Thank you so
Brilliant.
much.
Thank you so much for coming on
A lot of fun.
and for helping me when I lost my way.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Brilliant. Have a great afternoon, Joe. Cheers for
Thank
your
you.
time. See you, mate. Bye bye.